What's up, you guys? Stoopzz back again with another video, and today I have a new guide for all of you out there. Many of you have been asking me to post an update on the recent PvP changes in regards to healers, mana regeneration. Many of you have been running out of mana and wanted me to post a guide on how to better conserve your mana and how to be more mana efficient inside of World of Warcraft PvP. But first, a message from our sponsors. This video is sponsored by Cooldowns. Cooldowns is a 2v2 co-op PvP action game that features a matchmaking system where players can participate in various PvP missions and take on epic boss encounters. The game also features a unique combat system that allows players to switch their roles and abilities mid-fight for a refreshing feel. So whether you're looking to play alone to discover the world and its story, or group with a friend to take on other players, Cooldowns offers something for everyone. Check the link in the description for more information on the beta schedule. And there's our sponsor for this week. I'm happy to announce that if you're interested in checking it out, all of the information will be in the description box below. Now for today's video, we're going to be breaking down several tips on how you can better conserve your mana inside of World of Warcraft Arena. Now some of the information in this video might be a little bit more basic, while some of it might be a little bit more in depth. If you feel like you can't keep up with the video, or if you feel like it's a little too fast paced because there is a lot of information out there, I recommend you watch the video a few times. 30 minutes of your time is well worth it for hours of gameplay that you will be having inside of World of Warcraft Arena. So take the time to watch the video a few times if you are a little lost. If not, let's get started. So for the sake of this video, I've broken everything down into 4 tips. There is information beyond these 4 tips, but I feel like this is a happy medium or a good starting point for most players. So we're going to talk about the 4 tips, or give you a quick overview of the 4 tips, and then I'm going to break them down independently. The first tip being, when is it acceptable to look for drinks? The second tip being spell usage and overhealing. The third tip is going to be having an arena strategy, and the fourth tip being gear and how important it is as a healer. Now, a lot of the tips that I'll reference in this video, or information that I'll reference in this video, I have discussed some of it in the past, and all the links to any relative videos will also be in the description box below, so be sure to check that out. So when talking about drinks as a healer and when to go look for drinks to regenerate your mana outside of combat inside of an arena game, there are a few scenarios of when you can do that, but the first thing we should discuss is what type of water should we use as a healer. As a healer, you should make sure you always have seafoam coconut water. You can find this in every inn in relative content inside of Battle for Azeroth. Every innkeeper has this, and it's going to regenerate 83,000 mana over 20 seconds. You can also find mage food as a healer. If you're playing with a mage partner, they can make those biscuits at the table, and you can grab those. And those are a great 2-for-1 because it's percentage-based regen rather than just a specific number. But then on top of that, it also regenerates your health, so you can get a 2-for-1 value there. If you're about half health or 70% health, and you also want to regenerate your mana, you can heal up and regenerate mana at the same time. But make sure you have a full inventory, at least 100 stacks of this, or 100 individual units of this seafoam coconut water before the arena starts. Make sure you have this because it's going to be necessary for you to try and outmanner a healer, an enemy healer, and you won't be able to do that if you can't look for drinks if necessary. Now, when is it acceptable, or when is it a great time to go for these drinks as a healer? Well, there's a few scenarios. Scenario 1 is going to be the most common, and that is the stalemate. As a healer, there's going to be times where you're playing perhaps, and it's more common when you're playing with like a double spellcaster comp, and then you're fighting an enemy double spellcaster comp, right? So you have 2 casters on your team, maybe a warlock and an elemental shaman, and they have like an elemental shaman and a mage. When you're in these scenarios, you might be healing at a distance, and you might see that the enemy team drops a huge offensive cooldown. Maybe you're fighting a warlock and they drop infernals. And you're going to see this from your perspective, as well as when you're fighting against them, the same perspective, where you might want to retreat, or the enemy will retreat, and then it gets to a spot where both people are kind of just sitting behind the pillar and waiting for the offensive CD to kind of die out, or they're just waiting to reset or waiting for cooldowns, and the enemy team is almost agreeing to do the same because they don't want to push in either. When this happens, you need to be checking at your, looking for the drink icon and making sure you're out of combat, or looking to see if you're out of combat. And then this is when you want to go for a drink. You want to look to get drinks as much as possible during these time frames. If you're just going to sit around and spam heal and then yourself while they're drinking, that is a definite way to fall behind as a healer. You do not want to allow the enemy healer to drink and then not have the same opportunity for yourself. So when these stalemate scenarios happen, and you're going to see them in arena where everyone just kind of pulls back and resets, look to get a drink. Prioritize getting mana over healing your teammates. If they're at 70% HP, maybe you're at 70% HP, just maybe if you have any passive healing, let that happen, but look to get a drink and then worry about topping everyone off because they're not in immediate danger. The second scenario, and this is probably one of the best scenarios for you as a healer, is look for drinks when you have offensive pressure. If you're kind of low on mana and perhaps the enemy team healer is low on mana and your team has just popped a huge offensive CD. For the sake of this video, we'll use Infernals, again from the Warlock, because Infernals cause a ton of pressure. When you drop those Infernals, a lot of the times the enemy will retreat. If you've popped some huge offensive CDs and your teammates are already topped and you can't really assist them in any way to close out the game, you're just passively healing, you can use this time to get a drink, and that is an amazing way to seal the deal for your team because you already have a ton of pressure, i.e. Infernals, Vendetta, and during that time the enemy healer is having to expend a ton of mana trying to recover. Now if you can't assist your team in any way other than just healing and your team's already topped off, use this moment to get a drink, get behind a pillar, let your teammates know, hey, I'm gonna go for a drink, because they're not gonna be able, the enemy's not gonna be able to push out and try and stop your drink if they're already falling behind, and then you can secure the win essentially by getting a full drink off, because now they've spent a ton of mana, they've used up all their defensive CDs, their healer is going and you're going to regenerate to full mana. And I really like doing this because it's a cool thing as a healer to kind of lock in a win, and you don't get many opportunities to do that depending on the class that you play. Now the worst case scenario, but this does happen, is when you're already behind or the game is very, very close and you're dead out of mana. You have no mana left and your teammate is close to dying. You need to let him know, use any defensive CDs that you have. We're going to lose anyway. I need to try and go for a drink, where it's a desperate drink. These don't always work out. Sometimes it does happen and sometimes you can get away with it, but a lot of the times you know they're going to chase after you and try and stop you, but it's never, it's never a bad idea to try and get out of combat, try and heal, and then let your teammate survive on their own, and then try and come back and use a huge CD to recover, like Cocoon, Iron Bark, Overgrowth, Blessing of Sacrifice, Blessing of Protection, anything that you have as a healer to try and recover. But that's probably just the worst scenario out of all the three. All right, so now that we've talked about drinks, I see a lot of healers going for drinks at the wrong time when we already have pressure and he has a ton of mana, or I'm really low and it's not a good time to go for a drink and the game's very close. You'll get a sense of when it is a good time to go for a drink, but those are the 3 times that I can recommend to many of you in a general statement. But now moving on from drinks, we're going to talk about spell usage. One of the biggest problems that I see a lot of healers having right now is their spell usage and how they utilize defensive CDs and how they spend their mana in the first place. So one golden rule that I can recommend, or one golden add-on I can recommend, is details. You want to go through your details after a game and just see and monitor your overhealing. So for example, Enveloping Mist. You want to track what percentage of overhealing you had on a specific spell that game. Some spells are going to have a lot of overhealing, like Way of the Crane, for example. If I played it in a specific game, it might have a ton of overhealing because I'm dealing damage and I'm not worried about overhealing because I've already spent the mana for that spell. But specific spells or instances, when I'm doing coaching, I see a lot of people just overhealing, throwing out huge hots for no reason, mana expensive spells for no reason when the person's already topped off. So you want to let damage ride out, and you want to get out of the obsession of overhealing and keeping somebody topped off at 100%. If they're 90% health or they're 80% health and you already have hots on them, don't cast a regrowth. You want to try and let your hots ride out. Let your mana work for you, let your healing work for you, and don't overheal. And you can track that once again with an add-on called Details. I'll link the name in the description box below. But this add-on can track things like overhealing, and it'll let you know, for example, like Renewing Mist, I only had 12% overhealing. That's not that bad. You can also check the uptime of Renewing Mist. So 52%, that's also not very good. So you want to break down your healing and see where you're overhealing, where your uptime is, and get a sense if you are overhealing and trying to conserve some of your mana that way. Also, a tip that I can recommend is, please, I do this with all my all of my coaching clients already. You want to go back and watch your old games. Download OBS, download NVIDIA Shadowplay, download one of these programs to watch back your games, because by watching back your games, you can easily see, whoa, I'm spending way too much mana here. I'm overhealing way too much. So things like Details and watching back your games are going to help a lot. Now, in regards to spells, another thing that I see a lot of healers do incorrectly is they use their defensive CDs at the wrong time. So there is a reason why these arena tournaments clips go on for so long when you're watching them on twitch.tv for competing going into BlizzCon. There's a reason why people go into dampening and why they can conserve their mana so well. It's because they're using their offensive CDs or their defensive CDs at the right time, and so are their teammates. So if you're playing as a Resto Shaman, if you're playing as a Resto Druid, throwing out Bark Skin at a bad time, or throwing out your Cocoon perhaps at a bad time, even though it's quite mana efficient, or throwing out your Earthen Wall Totem at a bad time, is going to cost you a lot of mana because you're not mitigating the most amount of damage you would mitigate in the first place. So I have a video on how to track offensive CDs and how to pair your defensive CDs with this. I'll link all of those in the description box below. Please check those out. It will help you a lot and understand when you should be using these cooldowns. But it's so important to match your defensive CD with an offensive CD and try and mitigate the most amount of damage with your defensive cooldowns, and so should your teammates. If they're popping their wall just at the opener, their defensive CD, Die by the Sword or Astral Shift or any defensive CD, Ice Block at a bad time, if they're not mitigating the most amount of damage possible, then you're going to be healing for more than you should have to, which is going to spend more mana. So really watch that video that I linked in the description box below. Check it out because it's going to help you preserve mana by timing your CDs more effectively, using things like Disarm if you're playing as a Mistweaver Monk, using things like Thorns as a Resto Druid to try and deter the enemy from attacking at certain points in the game is going to save you lots of mana. Also, monitor your CC usage, right? Cyclone costs a lot of mana, Entangling Roots cost a lot of mana, so you want to see what you're using and if it's effective, right? If your offensive CDs are effective, or if your defensive CDs are effective at mitigating damage or causing pressure to try and mitigate damage that way. So it's very important that you're not just throwing out your CDs. Take the time to watch back your games or watch that video, and by doing that, it's going to help more than any of the tips I've talked about in this video. Try and line up your CDs at the right time. Don't just throw them out there, please. So that should cover spell usage and how important it is. Please just realize what you're casting and why you're casting it. Think about what you're doing before you do this. Wow, it's just a chess game. It's all about thinking about timings and does this line up with this? And if I use this at this time, is it going to be effective? It's not about just doing the most damage or doing the most healing. It's about lining things up at the right time. Now, moving on from that, we're going to go on to our next tip, and that is having a strategy which lines up with offensive CDs. If you go into an arena game and you don't have a solid strategy when doing arena and you're just running around doing as much damage as you can, you're not communicating things, and you don't talk about this prior, I talked about this exact topic in a different video, link in the description as well. But if you do not have a strategy before the gates open, you don't have a sense of what you're trying to accomplish in the game, and then you figure it out maybe midway through the game, you don't have a scenario A, B, or C, you just go out there and then try and figure it out on the fly. The problem with that is you're going to spend a lot of time, unnecessary time, having to heal or do damage. So you want to make sure you have a strategy. You want to make sure, okay, we're going to go for this target first, land CC on the healer. If that doesn't work, we're going to get the healer's trinket, and then we're going to swap to the healer. These are strategies, number one, that your teammates are going to pick up on and say, hey, this guy's pretty smart. Maybe we should play more in the future. But on top of that, they're going to preserve you a lot of mana because you're not spending useless time just figuring things out on the fly and just doing a bunch of damage and having to overheal or overcompensate using your spells, just trying to figure things out in the first place. So you want to make sure you have a strategy, and then your teammates are using their offensive CDs at the right time. They're not popping your offensive CD into a defensive CD, right? If you pop your offensive CD and you see the shaman just had to use his wall, his defensive cooldown to mitigate that damage, you're popping your, for example, maybe you're popping your recklessness as a warrior into an earthen wall totem from the defensive shaman, the enemy healer, and that's his defensive CD. By doing that, you're mitigating your damage, meaning that you're not dealing as much, so the enemy healer doesn't have to heal as much. So then you're having to expend more mana than him during their offensive goes because you didn't time yours correctly. So you want to make sure, watch this part again if you don't understand what I'm talking about, you want to make sure that you're timing your cooldowns, your offensive cooldowns at the right time, and you have a strategy on when to use them and what your win condition is. I've talked about win condition before, but I will make a new video on it in the future. But take the time to understand your win condition and when you're going to use your CDs, your offensive CDs, before the game even starts. All right, my last tip on this, and I might make specific guides for specific healers on how to save mana in the future, but this is a general video. My last tip is going to be having solid eye level. I know so many people that are ultaholics and they tried a bunch of different alts, and maybe you're a DPS class or a healer, but you never get the gear to see the full potential of that class. So a lot of people like 370 eye level on like 4 different characters. You need to make sure that your teammates and that you have solid eye level. Now, if you're low eye level, please do not, try and find high eye level people. Play with people around your eye level. Now, eye level is certainly a barrier to rating. I mean, if you're really good at the game and you have good teammates or friends, then you might be able to climb without having decent eye level. But you'll notice that people at low rating, for the most part, they all have low HP or low damage or low eye level because they don't have the gear to get through the ranks. So you want to take the time. It's part of the game. This is why we're playing an MMO, you guys. Just go out there and get your PvP caps every week. Go out there and make sure you do your emissaries every week for pieces of gear. They drop 385 pieces of gear. Do your mythic 10 if you can per week. Do any type of content to acquire gear, because the more gear that you have, the stronger your healing is going to be, the more HP you're going to have, the larger your health pool is going to be, and then the more gear your teammates have. If you're playing with 2 DPS or a DPS, the more damage they're going to deal, and the more damage they're going to deal, the more the enemy healer is going to have to actually spend mana. And if they're doing more damage in your team, well, no wonder you're running out of mana, because if they're doing a ton of damage and you're not doing any damage, then you're going to spend more mana than the enemy healer. So for example, if you're fighting a team and your team's not doing any damage, you're going to allow the enemy healer more time to look for drinks because there's not as much pressure. Now on the flip side, if the enemy team is dealing a ton of damage, you're going to have less time to go look for drinks, and you're going to have to spend more mana just trying to recover, and you're going to have to blow more defensive CDs just to recover. So having gear is so important, you guys. It's so important. Get the right traits that are going to help you save mana. Things like, for example, Overflowing Mist, going to help you save mana. Burst of Life, Ysera's Gift, Grove Tending. There's tons of traits for healers that are going to help you save mana because they offer free healing. So if you think that your class sucks, or you can't heal, or you're running really fast, it could be just because of your gear or the gear of your teammates. Now, I know that was a quick general video for all of you out there. I'll make more in-depth videos on specific classes on how to save mana, but I can't stress enough how important it is, you guys, to, number 1, look for drinks at the optimal time. Number 2, tracking your spell usage and making sure that you're not over-healing for no reason, and you're lining up your defensive cooldowns with the enemy offensive cooldowns to try and mitigate damage and thus spend less mana. Number 3, having a strategy. Having a strategy in World of Warcraft Arena is so important, and by having a strategy, you can accelerate the speed of the game and will allow specific healers like Disc Priest, where mana might not be an issue if you can end the game within a couple minutes. So having a strategy is very important regardless of the comp. Finally, number 4, get your gear. Go out there and grind some gear. This is an MMO. People miss vanilla WoW. Well, go out there and get gear. It's not that hard. You don't need the best gear, but having at least a decent eye level. Having a decent eye level is very important inside of World of Warcraft PvP. But those are just my 4 tips on how to save mana. If you guys enjoyed this video, you can let me know in the comment section below. If you have any other questions on how you can conserve mana, let me know in the comment section below, and I'll try and get back to you as soon as I can. Big shout out to all my Patreon supporters who've been supporting me this whole time on Patreon. The link is in the description box below if you're interested in doing so. And by doing so, you can also earn yourself some individualized coaching. The cheapest coaching I might add anywhere. Try not to miss me on my Twitch live stream or answer all of your guys' questions in depth. Do not forget to subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.